Hey there, welcome to today's episode. I'm going to be taking a look at a new sample pack from the Butcha. Always exciting times when you drop something new. This time it's Filth Vol.8. We're now up to the 8th in the series, and I really love the Filth series because it's just really dark and gritty sounds, something that really appeals to me. We're not going to go through every sample, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what's included, and then we'll cook up a little bit of a beat towards the end of the video. I'm using Koala Sampler for this particular demonstration, but of course they're just high quality WAV files, so you'll be able to use them with any of your samplers. And the cool thing about this particular Filth series is that if we open up samples and take a look, Butcha Filth Vol.8, we now get 16-bit and 24-bit files. What that means is that if you've got an older sampler, like an older MPC, you don't need to do a bunch of conversion because they don't really like 24-bit files, they prefer 16-bit, so it's right here. Now, I've always said this about the Butcha kits, he gives you plenty for your money. You do get a lot of samples in here. This particular sample pack, around 5 gig almost in terms of the content. Now, you can narrow that down a little bit if you're concerned about the space because you could just choose 16-bit or the 24-bit files. You don't need to keep both of them on your storage. But we do have almost 5 gigs worth of samples. So let's take a look at the 16-bit. Doesn't really matter. It's the same content in each folder. We've got 570 breaks, which is pretty crazy. We also have this second folder, extra filthy drum breaks, where we've got another 249 breaks. We also have some music chops, and this time 657 variants in there that you'll be able to slice up. We've got a bunch of one-shots that will consist of things like your kick drum, snares, that type of stuff. We'll take a look at those in a moment. And we've also got this perks folder where there'll be a bunch of like perk loops, again, things that you'll be able to slice up and have some fun with. Let's start by going into the breaks folder. Now, as I said, we can't listen to every sample here, there's just far too many, but we'll take a quick run through, just give you a preview of some of the sounds that are included. And you can see as I'm going to scroll through, there's just tons and tons of content inside of these folders. Let's take a quick peek at these extra filthy drum breaks as well. Next, let's take a look at the music chops. As I mentioned, 657 chops in here. let's open up this one-shots folder. And here you can see we've got some effects, we've got some hats, kicks, perks, and some snares. And then finally, we've got this perk folder. We've got a bunch of percussive loops. So as you can see, a pretty comprehensive sample pack. Lots and lots to get stuck into here. Not only do you have all of the one-shots, but if you want to slice up a drum break, you can get into cutting those things up. We've got all of these musical chops. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to put something together real quick using some of these samples. I think I'll start by taking one of these drum breaks. This one's called the Tourist Trap. I really like the sound of this. So we'll load that up into Koala. We'll open this up in the edit window. And I just want to make sure it's set as a one-shot because we're just going to loop it up. Now I'm going to start playback on this loop so that I can try and calculate the BPM using tap tempo. I think we're roughly around 68 BPM, so we'll start there at 68 and see how we get on. It's just a short loop at 1 bar, so we can open up a sequence and we can put that across the top of the sequence. Just make sure it's snapped to the beginning of the grid. We're close, but the BPM's not exact. We will put it back up to 68.5. There we go, got it looped up. So 68.5 BPM on this one. Next, we'll get back into the samples and see if we can find one of those musical chops that we can slice up and have some fun with it. Now, the cool thing about the Beat Butcher stuff, the same with the drum breaks and the musical chops, he gives you variants of the same sample. So if you want to create more interest throughout your beats, there's plenty that you can kind of pick and choose from. I like this one called Codfather 2, so I'm going to load that one up. That's going to be our sample that we're going to slice, play around with. We'll go back to the sample page and open this thing up in the editor. One thing with this particular sample, the volume's a little low, so we'll normalize it first. We'll go over to Tools and we'll normalize, just make sure we're getting the best out of it. Now, there's lots of ways that we can chop up the sample with Koala. What we're going to do, we'll go to Auto Chop. I'm going to erase these and I'm just going to put the slice points in manually wherever I think they should be. So I'm just going to pick out some of these transients, not all of them. We can use transient detection, but I think it'll be cool just to pick a few points and then we'll start moving things around from there. I want to keep a copy of the original sample. I want to put them all into the same choke group because I don't want them to overlap. We're going to make sure they're one shots and then I'm going to say chop. And that's now spread them across the pads, but you will notice it's kept the original sample there as well, just in case we want to go back and tweak something. The cool thing with this chopping mode is that it's non-destructive, so you'll notice, although I've got my little chop here, I still have access to the rest of the sample if we need to start tweaking things, moving them around. And we want to do our own thing with this, so I'm going to hold down Edit, grab all of these slices, and I'm going to pitch them down a couple of semitones. I think 2 semitones sounds pretty cool. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to hold down Edit and grab all of them again, because this time I want to send all of the sample slices to a mix bus where we can mess around with it. So we're going to go to Mix, and I'm going to send all of these slices to bus A. So if we go over to Perform, we can now put a little bit of delay on bus A and just drive all of those samples through to this delay effect. I'll probably sync it to the BPM, put it to say something like 1/8, and then we'll just change the mix ever so slightly. Now all of these sample chops have a little bit of delay applied. You can hear it like that, sounds pretty cool. Next up, we'll just start looping up the drums and playing our sample chops, see if we can come up with like a new pattern, something that's going to work for what we want. think there's something there that I kind of like, but what I want to do is I want to extend this sequence first because we've only got 1 bar, so let's double it up to 2 bars at least. And let's get that recorded in as a bit of a loop. Now that's okay, but we need to tidy it up a little bit. If we just move in here, I'm going to just take this one little piece and I'm going to move it back into line because it's kind of out of line where I wanted it. I like what we've got going on, but I feel like the sample chops could be maybe a little bit slower, so I might pitch them down a little bit more just to see what that sounds like. We'll hold down edit, we'll take all of the slices, and I'm just going to use the pitch as it's playing back to just get a feel for what I want. Now if we go back to our sample page, I'm going to just start playing around with the start and end points of some of these samples. Now we're only using a couple of the slices, so it's not going to take too long, but if we just click on some of these, we can kind of deselect and reselect. And the idea is just to clean up a little bit. What I might do as well is apply a little bit of attack to all of these slices just to make sure there's no kind of unwanted clicks and pops at the beginning. So we'll just apply a little bit of attack. Now, because we had quantization on, it's actually snapped really tight to the grid, and the timing of these I think needs to be ever so slightly behind the grid. It needs to be a little bit lazier. So we're going to keep this first slice snapped at the beginning of the grid, but I'm just going to select all of these other slices and just nudge those over. So we'll go into free mode and just kind of pull those off the grid a little bit. I feel like the timing should be slightly more lazy. Now that's sounding pretty good. I think this one slice here at the beginning of bar 2 should be snapped back a little bit though, just like the beginning of bar 1. So we'll take hold of that one. I'm going to put it back into 1/16 in terms of the snapping and just pull that over. And over on this perform tab, I want to go back to the delay and I want to try some different timing for the delay and pull the mix down a little bit more. It's kind of a little bit loud for me, just want it a little bit more subtle in the background. I like that timing more for the delay, I just think it sounds better. There's something still bugging me about the first sample slice. It's kind of like the way that kicks in, but we do have the option to just play around with it. We still got the whole sample. So I think maybe partly what it is this little part here where it's got kind of a little kind of double up at the beginning. Let's see what happens if we elongate the sample. Now if we mute out the drums, I'm trying to work out how much bass is in that sample so that we can maybe bring in our own bass line. Now I noticed inside of the music chops, this one called Cartagena bass. Now I think what we can do is we can take one of those notes out of there and create a bass line with it. So we'll load up this sample. And all we need to do is just pinch one of the longer notes out of this bass line. We'll go over to tools and go to normalize first. And looking at the waveform, I'm thinking either this one here or this one. There's like a little noise here we're going to get rid of at the end. But that should be good enough to create a bass line with. Because it's a bass line, I'm going to put it in its own choke group just to make sure that it doesn't overlap as a sample. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to crop this down as well. So we'll crop it just to this one note. We'll apply a little bit of attack at the beginning and a tiny little bit of release at the end just to make sure there's no clicks and pops. I'm going to make sure it's a one shot. And then if we go over to sequence, we'll be able to use the piano tool and select that sample. I'm going to switch over into the keyboard mode and just keep it chromatic, and that way we should be able to just take that one bass note and play it like an instrument. Couple of simple notes, something we don't have to overcook it. Now it's not too bad, but the bass sounds just ever so slightly out of tune. What we need to do is go to our settings and just make sure that you disable pitch knob snap to semitone. That means you can kind of fine tune your sample. So we'll fine tune this bass a little bit, just see if we can get it to sound a little bit better. Good good enough. So we've got our drums, we've got our sample chops, we've now got a little bit of a bass line. We need to just jazz this up. We're not going to go too far in today's episode. I just want to create like an idea, something that I might build upon later on. But let's go back into the samples and see what else we've got. Maybe some kind of percussive element. Kind of like these ride cymbals. Let's load those up. Now this is technically a loop. We don't really know what the BPM is. We could try and time stretch it and just see if it fits in. So if we take that sample, I can make sure it's set to one shot and loop. And if we go over here, we can time stretch it. We want to time stretch it for 1 bar because that's what we think we've got. And if we go back to our sequence, we can just pop that in and see how it sounds if we put it across the board. Now it's pretty close, but we could just take complete control of it. If we go to the sample, I might take the stretching off, and what I might do is just pick out one of these ride cymbals. I'm going to take the looping back off, just make sure it's set as a 1 shot. And inside of the sequence, I'm just actually going to put these across the board like this so that we can play around with the timing and the velocity for each of the ride cymbals. Now for this particular pattern, I do want to add extra notes in, so I'm going to add them across the board. And then using the velocity, I'm just going to put some velocity variation in so that they're not all hitting it exactly the same volume. They're a little bit eager in comparison to the drum break. So what we'll do is we'll grab hold of those and we'll just move them around a little bit. We'll take them off the grid. And I can just shift the notes as it's playing and see if I get it to feel right. Now looking at this little ride cymbal, another thing we can do, if you want to take off some of the harsh edges, we could apply a little bit of attack to this to kind of soften the beginning of that sound. I kind of like it like that. I don't really want that cymbal to have such a harsh hit at the beginning. Really, I just want them to be this little kind of background noise that's sort of simmering away. And another thing I like to do is just tweak the pitch and see whether there's a pitch that works better with the sample. I think -4 semitones sounds pretty cool because it just gives it a slightly more darker vibe. We brought them down. Now inside of the one shots folder, we know we had some effects sounds, so let's go into there, see if we can find something to just kind of spice this up a little bit more. Now I like this little woman's breath noise that we've got at the bottom. I think that could be kind of cool. We'll load that into the project and then we can apply that to our sequence. Now we're still only working with 2 bars. What might be cool is to open this up. We'll switch it out now to 4 bars. We'll make it slightly longer. That way we can put in a couple of little bits of variation. And one thing I want to do is I want to have 3 bars of the same sample chops and then switch it up in the 4th bar. So we'll go back into the sequence and where our sample slices are, we'll just kind of cut out a piece of that and then try and fill it with something else. We know these are the sample chops here. So in this final bar, the 4th bar, I'm just going to grab those and I'm going to delete it. We only used a couple of pieces of the original set of slices. So we've got all of these slices available. There'll be something else here that we can use to create that switch up. Now I kind of like these 2 sample slices here. Kind of played sort of like that. That's kind of the timing that I want. So I'm going to record that in and then we can always shift things around later on. I like the concept, but we need to play around with the timing to get that to fit better and maybe even adjust the volume a little bit as well. So this is our 4th bar where we can kind of zoom in. I can grab all of these, and I think maybe it's the same thing as the other sample chops. I think they're just kind of a little bit eager. They might want to be slightly behind the grid. So we'll start there by just kind of shifting these back a little bit. I am going to grab both of these and just turn the volume down ever so slightly. Not too much, but a little bit. That's sounding pretty cool. It's not a bad idea. It's something that we certainly could build upon in the future. I think one final thing where we have this switch up might be cool to just pick out like another one of the sound effects or something and just have that kind of kick in there. I kind of like this one called Space Pregnancy, which is a weird title. Let's load it up. I'm going to open up the sequence and I just want that to kick in at the beginning of the 4th bar. So rather than recording it in, I'm just actually going to put that piece in and let it play through. Now the sample's kind of cool, but this is a sample that clearly has some kind of delay in it, and the delay timing of that doesn't really fit with what we've got going on. Now, we can do what we did with our ride cymbals. We could actually just crop this down and we can add our own delay. So I just want a couple of those little sort of wobbly noises. Just something like that. I might even kind of trim the beginning a little bit. And then I'm going to send it over to the same bus that we have our delay on, which is bus A. So if we go back to our mix, we can send it through to bus A, where we've got our own delay effect being applied. That sort of works, but actually what we'll do, we'll send it over to bus B, and then we'll choose another type of delay. So let's go for the tape delay. And with the sample itself, I'm just going to turn it up a little bit louder. Yeah, kind of like that more. It's only a small detail, but I like the way that it sounds. The final little piece of the puzzle here, I'm just going to grab a daft little vocal sample. I'll take something from YouTube, something like that. Little movie clip, something that we can play around with. I've got this one here. You might know the movie it's from.
You don't make up for your sins in the church. You do it in the streets.
It's a pretty cool sample. I think all we want is this little part where he says you do it in the streets. I think that's kind of cool.
You do it in the streets.
And I'm going to send that through to the same bus B, where we've got our tape delay.
You do it in the streets.
And we're just going to find a little part to record that into the loop.
Do it in the streets.
And there we go. That's our beat made for today. If you're interested in this particular sample pack, there are links in the description below. It is a fantastic new kit from the Beat Butcher. You've got so much that you can play around with here. Highly recommend it. Go check it out, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Take care.